Hello, hello, hello. My name is Devinator, no L, Castronomical. And this is Devinator's radio show. Tune in into what we're doing on Halloween night because we're going to interview 3 people and have them tell us their scary stories. The first story we have today is called Halloween Decorations. There's this man who lived in this neighborhood, and everybody else in the neighborhood had Halloween decorations. Very flashy and expensive Halloween decorations. And he wanted to fit in. And he wanted to not stand out. And he wanted Halloween decorations. So he went to the nearest store to look for some. But everything he wanted was just too expensive. All the animatronics and the paints and the stickers, everything was just too expensive. So instead of buying decorations at the store, he bought decorations from this guy. This very shady guy who sold decorations out of a back alley from a van. But they were cheap. They were very, very cheap. It was a bargain, honestly. It was a great deal. And the Halloween decorations were perfectly lifelike. There were witches, zombies, skeletons, and they all looked so real. So he bought all of them. He took them in his car and he drove home. And he set everything up. And by the end of it, everything looked amazing. Everything looked horrifying, honestly. His house stood out of every other house in the neighborhood. But the week leading up to Halloween, things kind of changed. Every night he would hear noises and slight knocks around his house. But every time he would look outside, he didn't see anyone but the Halloween decorations. He kept hearing his doorbell ring too, but whenever he would go outside and check it, he saw no one. So he just assumed it was ding-dong ditchers. But he would always hear laughter outside his house. He just thought it was the neighbors being loud. But sometimes, in the morning when he would leave to work, he saw the Halloween decorations move. He just thought maybe they were unbalanced and falling over. Maybe the wind was causing them to tip over. He didn't think much about it. It wasn't until the night before Halloween where he heard a doorbell ring. Pissed off, he went and opened the door, and he saw every Halloween decoration standing outside, in front of his door. On Halloween night, there was a bowl of candy on a table outside the man's house. And everybody went by the house and took the candy. And he looked at the decorations, took pictures, but one decoration stood out. It was of the owner of the house. He was strung up, bloody, beaten, and he had a terrified facial expression. Our second story today is called self-sculpture. There's this woman who had an idea to make a self-sculpture for an art contest. She worked day and night, pouring her sweat onto the sculpture just to get it done. But once she finished, it looked amazing. It looked perfectly like her, lifelike. However, she didn't think so. She thought it could be better. But there was an incident. She used one of the tools wrong and she cut herself. And the blood poured onto the sculpture. By the time she tended to her wounds, the blood was already gone. So she didn't bother cleaning it up. In order to make the sculpture look more lifelike, she shaved all of her hair and made it into a wig. And she put it on the sculpture. She even got some of her clothes in her closet and put it on the sculpture. But every day, the surface of the sculpture would look more and more like her skin. It would change color, and it seemed softer. She thought the sculpture looked so beautiful, she cried, and some of her tears got onto the sculpture. Eventually, the sculpture looked exactly like her, even more than it did before. But when you looked into its eyes, it was soulless. So, the sculpture came alive and took the woman's soul straight from her body. Okay, our next story is called Creepy Faces. There's this woman who just moved into a new home. She set up all the furniture by herself because she lived alone. But even though she lived alone, the place she was at was extremely nice for the amount of money she was paying. Anyways, it was the first night staying at her new home. She went to bed and she went to sleep. But in the middle of the night, she woke up, but she couldn't move. Her room was dark, illuminated only from the street lights that was outside her house. Unfortunately for her, her doorway was wide open, and something about it made her really nervous. She tried moving, but she couldn't, no matter how hard she tried. From the darkness, She saw a face, a wide open smile, but with no teeth. It had long pointy ears and big eyes. The skin was a dark red. The face was gigantic, nearly the size of half a doorway. The face had no body, however. It just had a long neck. It slithered from the doorway and right in front of the woman. The face lunged at her, causing her to wake up and sweat, screaming. It wasn't too early where she had to go back to sleep, but it was late enough where if she didn't sleep, she would be tired. Though, she couldn't go back to sleep anyways. It gets stranger. Every day, whenever the woman would look in a mirror, brushing her hair, checking her makeup, or just brushing her teeth, she would see something from the corner of her eye. And her brain told her it was a face. But whenever she looked directly at it, or she looked behind her, there was nothing. As the weeks go by, it just gets worse and worse, and it happens more frequently. She was driving, and when she looked into her rearview mirror, she saw a face jump at her. This caused her to nearly crash, die. A month goes by, and it hasn't gotten any better. Whenever she sees someone, their face just looks distorted. Whenever she went to visit her family, their faces weren't the way she remembers. Every face was different. Some faces were longer, some faces looked more melted, some looked more skinny, some looked fatter, but every one of them was just as horrifying. Not being able to take it anymore, she moved out and moved somewhere else. Months go by and she hasn't seen a face since. Everything seems to be going better. That was until one night, before she went to bed. She looked into the mirror. She couldn't recognize her face. It was so creepy. That's all we got for today. Tune in next time to Devinator's radio show to hear some more spooky stories.